I didn't script this again, so I might not remember everything I was going to say, but anyway. First, on the topic of non-localized content and games without localizations. Since last time I did one of these, I learned about about three things. One is called Textstractor, so it's like extractor but with a T in front, Textstractor. The other, Text Hooker, and lastly, OCR. So, Textstractor and Text Hooker they essentially hook onto text being called forth by an application. Similarly to how kind of OBS works, where OBS will look for outputs by an application through like the application giving outputs to your screen via your video driver. These things will look for text being outputted to the screen, and they will hook onto it, and they can be used specifically to translate Japanese text in something that kind of puts out text in an unclear way as it's going on under the hood in real time. Like, so if you were to say, play a game in Japanese, if the text as it's stored in the like game engine is as text, then something like Textstractor or Text Hooker can hook the text, and then real time ping Google Translate or Bing Translate to Google Translate or Bing Translate the text. So this gives you a Bing Translate or Google Translate translation of the game you're playing, which isn't the best, but it's better than nothing. And will allow you to play something in Japanese and understand some of the content therein. With maybe you don't know some of the words you encounter in the Japanese text, it kind of bails you out. Or it could be used if you don't know Japanese entirely, but you have to keep in mind it's a Google Translate translation, and it will, because it doesn't know the context of each sentence, and because it doesn't, it might do some weird synonym stuff or alternate usage. It may not be like, you gotta take every line it gives you with somewhat of a grain of salt. Now, I don't know. It did at first brush I don't know why this couldn't be done if it's a text hooker. In fact, this is gonna pause the game, but I'm gonna actually look at this text hooker language compatibility. You would think if it could just hook text, it should be able to translate any language. It looks like it's only for Japanese for some reason. It's interesting. And odd. I know that OCR is Japanese only, although they say that it can be generalized to other languages. They've only done Japanese so far. And this somewhat makes sense because of the popularity of Japanese text media in the United States, for example. That the Americans would invent something like this to kind of mouse over Google Translate Japanese text. So Text Hooker and Textstractor, they hook onto text. OCR is a little bit more complicated. It's something that is not as good as Text Hooker or Textstractor, but it can be your only option if the way that the game engine works is you can't hook onto the text. So what it will do is it will like take the image on screen and identify the text in it using some sort of like edge detection or something, and do that, and then try to Google Translate the text. So it's like this is kind of a buzzword. I don't really like buzzwords, but it's like a machine. What's I gonna say here? Computer vision. There we go. It's a computer vision kind of thing. In case you can't hook onto the text. So now that I know about these tools, though, although they aren't necessarily as good as being a Japanese speaker or really knowing Japanese very well, these can really help bail me out, potentially, if I'm playing something that's in Japanese. In that, if I have to translate something with Google Translate, I don't have to have Google Translate open in like another monitor or on another computer, and because I'd be recording, of course, or I have to click off to it or something, and I wouldn't have to type into it, which with Japanese is a big advantage because Japanese isn't particularly easy to type. And I wouldn't necessarily know how to Romanize the kanji, because the pronunciation is different depending on what word they're being used to represent. So, as far as I understand it, kanji have pronunciations, it's just that they don't tell you how to pronounce the word when they're used to depict a word. I haven't looked that much into Japanese yet, so I don't really know much more than that, or I might be guessing. That being said, although you would think something like Texthooker or Textractor would work on something on any language rather easily, it would just, hook onto any and all text. Apparently it doesn't yet. So these things still don't help me when it comes to, say, Korean. And I haven't tried these things yet because I don't have any Japanese games like the files to try them on yet. Actually, I might. I have like the Never 7 original Japanese disc images. So, I might be able to try it out on those. I guess I do have one. Anyway, I don't have any Japanese games I want to actually use this on my computer yet, so I haven't been able to test I haven't downloaded and installed or tested any of these. Anyway, Korean, for some reason there isn't one. I would think it would be trivial to do like a Texthooker or Text Extractor for Korean, but I don't know of one. So, I could Google this in real time. I could say Textractor, Texthooker for Korean or something like that, and see if somebody posted on Reddit. Nope. So no results for that. So that are of any. So that these things don't exist for. So I think something that would hook onto text would be trivial for Korean. It doesn't exist. And OCR doesn't exist for Korean either. But of course that would actually make sense because Korean, it would be slightly more difficult to make an OCR for than something like Japanese because it's not written as a linear sequence of characters. It's written in letters, but they're arranged, when you write it, you arrange them into these syllable blocks. And depending on where a letter falls within that syllable block, it might be slightly different shape, like a different stretch to it. And so you have to identify, your OCR would have to look at the image, identify syllable blocks, and then pick apart the syllable blocks into their individual letters, which would be way more challenging than doing something that's written with Japanese, where everything is a hiragana, katakana, or kanji left to right, or up to top to bottom, and it's a linear sequence of characters, mostly being each one the same size. So these are I learned about these, and these are nice, but for Japanese, Korean is still like this thing that's like, I still don't have. So these tools don't exist for Korean, which is a little bit inconvenient. It would be nice if they did, but it kind of makes sense because Japanese visual novels are more popular in the United States and English amongst English and other, English-speaking people than Korean visual novels are. So I can guess what the priority is. Luckily, Korean is easier to type in than Japanese. It's actually really easy to type in once you get the hang of it. I definitely can't type it as fast as Roman stuff, but it's decent. Anyway, so if you're wondering if I ever learned about stuff like OCR, yes, I have. So it's not as good as actually learning the language, but it makes it the whole typing stuff to Google Translate you don't know easier because you could just mouse over it Again, I haven't tried it and seen how well it works, but it's supposed to help somewhat. And again, because Google Translate, it's supposed to come up with some goofy stuff sometimes. So that was, I think, the most important thing. Something I guess I talked a little bit about. I was actually playing Control. I tried to talk about this while playing Control, and the problem is that Control doesn't have much dead time in it, which is kind of a good thing for a video game. You don't want to have like a bunch of stall time in a video game. But it was kind of like, if I want to talk, it makes it so that basically I can't really talk about things during the gameplay of that game. Like, I just have to play the game and I can't really talk during it, which is fine. But we had to move this over here. Because this didn't really work in the Control. So, weird computer, some more that like, you're gonna go, oh no, he's gonna talk about GPUs again. But yes, I'm gonna talk about GPUs again. So, you might know this, but I have you probably might have guessed this, but the the encoder I'm using to record this very video is an encoder in a RTX 3090. So this is being recorded in January of 2022. Just kind of for reference, you kind of know like where the tech industry was at that time. So the current generation of NVIDIA graphics cards at this point is the NVIDIA 30 series. The 40 series is supposed to come out, as far as I know at this time, sometime near in the fall, like September of this year, 2022. And there's going to be a 3090 Ti coming out probably at the end of January. We don't know the exact date. Rather close to the release of the 40 series, which means it's kind of a late release of this graphics card. But what I'm trying to get, so mine's a 3090, and the board partner is EVGA, and the model is FTW3 Ultra. Generally, this is, at the time, there is a shortage in graphics cards and silicon, and buying a graphics card is extremely difficult. It became a scalping target. There was a mining boom early 2021, as in cryptocurrency mining. And there's a lot more people that want them than there are ones to go around. And it's not necessarily because I said there's a shortage, but it's like they managed to make more than ever before. But they would have managed to make even more than that still if there wasn't a shortage, because the demand is even greater than that still. So it's kind of like, it's just, the demand just went so crazy that even with more graphics cards than ever before, they still couldn't keep up. So it's very difficult to buy a graphics card. Even in early 2022, it's still difficult to buy a graphics card of any sort of high end. You can get some AMD 6900 XTs, but only the crazy board partner models that cost over 2K, where the reference model only costs 1K. So twice MSRP ones you could get. And of course, you know what I'm saying, right? It's easy to buy one off eBay. It's just that, well, the bid might outbid you. Bids might go above you, but it's just that you shouldn't do that, because those people that are selling it on eBay, they didn't do anything to earn your money. Buying the graphics card isn't something that should warrant them earning money, because by doing it, they're making it harder for you to buy the graphics card. They help to create the problem that they are solving for you. That doesn't count. Anyway, so I have like a 3090 FTW3 Ultra, and it's a bit overpowered for what I'm actually doing with it, so it's a bit wasted. But it's what I could get get my hands on that was more powerful than a 3060. A 3060 just was not cutting it, especially in real-time hardware encoding. If you watch my Bionicle the Game footage, you'll see that it did not encode that footage very well. And I had the bitrate kind of low, but it seems like even with the bitrate it was at, a better encoder hardware would have done a better job. This graphics card, the 3090 FTW3 Ultra, is sort of the source of some drama. When it first came out, back in like the fall of 2020, it was like in October or something when the 3090 came out. EVGA used these polymer capacitors, these can-shaped capacitors that were insufficient specifications for the whatever place within the board they were using them on their 3090s. And the capacitors would explode. And so some of the earliest 3090 FTW3s were very fragile. They were very unreliable. And many of them popped. Well, they pretty much all popped. And EVGA replaced them all under warranty. Later on, in the fall of 2021, Amazon came out with the beta of New World. And by this time, when New World is the production, like the final build has come out. New World is a massively multiplayer online, an MMO made by Amazon that is apparently really popular and people like to play it. Don't personally have any interest in playing it myself, but people like it. So anyway, New World is a thing. The beta and even the full release of it, very commonly when being played on a 3090 FTW3 Ultra, would pop. The FTW3 would pop. So people sent these back to EVGA under warranty. EVGA apparently X-ray analyzed them and found that it was a bad solder joint on one of the power stages. Some people speculated earlier it was something to do with the fan controller. It wasn't at all. It's something to do with the power stage and bad soldering onto the PCB. And they apparently it only affected a limited number of early production run cards, and then it got fixed later. Although it got fixed, EVGA didn't recall the ones that had the flaw. They just kind of fixed it and hoped the flaw wouldn't catch up to them. But it came up as a problem later. For some reason, even though it's a piece of software, most commonly when people played New World by Amazon on these cards. So I don't know what if this is because of these two instances, they kind of opened the floodgates. But there's a lot of theories people float around here. I don't know which are true, but I don't know the full statistics. There are many more reports now on the internet of 3090 FTW3 Ultras failing than any other graphics card whatsoever, including other 3090s by other AIB partners. There might be the right reasons for this. One is there's just more of those. That somehow EVGA managed to get from NVIDIA more Galahad, more GA102 chips than the other board partners, and that are 3090 ready, and just got more 3090 FTW3s out there. And so because there's more of them, there's a higher report of failure, but if you were to divide the amount of failures over the amount of ones that are out there, it would be somewhat consistent with other manufacturers. This doesn't seem to make sense to me why the divvying up of the chips amongst the AIBs would be so, biased like that. I mean, these board partners are going to make as many 3090s as they got 3090s and Micron memory from EVGA and Micron, or Samsung, depending on where they're sourcing their memory. And so they're going to make the same amount, each company, you would think, unless somehow EVGA had a way of convincing NVIDIA to send them more chips. NVIDIA put most of their chips into 3090 FTW3s. They have other boards for the 3090 they sell that are cheaper, but they put most of their chips by far into their FTW3 boards. Anyway, another theory is that EVGA's online forums and online community are more engaged with them on the internet. The forums on the EVGA website are much more active than that on other gaming hardware's websites. And so people that tend to buy EVGA products are more prone to post about potential problems they're having with their products on the internet than people who buy other cards. Next, another one is, because this card is also known to fail already, this opened the floodgates for people to post about their failings, because they could feel like they could get more sympathy. And specifically, if you read, like when EVGA 3090s fail, people make a new topic on the EVGA like forums or message boards about their 3090 failing. The titles will be something like, "I just joined the Red Light of Death Club," or "I joined the club of people whose 3090 FTW3s failed," or whatever. Where it's like, because there's kind of this community of people whose FTW3 Ultra 3090s have failed already, that kind of like helps encourage people to post about their failings too. Theirs failing. And so you just get a higher report rate on the internet of failing FTW3s than other 3090s. So because of these factors, we don't know if the FTW3 by EVGA has a much, aside from New World and aside from their early production ones, has a higher failure rate than other AIB partners' graphics cards. We don't really know. But it kind of seems like it. And of course, that makes me nervous as well. So I have a kind of a graphics card in my computer that's very high-end and extremely powerful and performs very well, but is known to be unreliable, it turns out. This is kind of hard to avoid because it's really hard to choose which graphics card you get, right? Like mine's like overpowered, is like way more than I need because of that issue. And so it's hard to pick the brand. It's just like if you wait in line in front of the Micro Center, it's turned to a lottery now. Just whatever you win in the Newegg Shuffle, you're not going to know what that is. You're not going to know what's available. You're just going to have to take what you can get. It's that or nothing. So, and it seems like the EVGA 3090 FTW3 is the easiest card to get a hold of because that was the one that was in the EVGA waitlist, and the one that actually, whose waitlist actually moved, the one that tends to be in stock at Micro Center the most often, and so on. So it's more like very likely to be the one you got, and it's like, you know, whatever. But it has a stigma around it to be kind of like a time bomb, and it's going to die any moment. And of course, you could send it back to EVGA for a warranty, repair, or replace. They're going to send you back a refurbished card that's going to fail in the same amount of time. So, relative, also, some other things about it. Relative to other, it's kind of a flagship product from EVGA, but other AIB partners' flagship products, for example, like the Asus ROG Strix and the I'm going to say the MSI Gaming X Trio. They also have something called the Supreme X, but that's a binned card, so that's a little bit even more special. Those 3090s, they're way more expensive than, they tend to be around the $2,300 range retail, as opposed to the FTW3, which is around the 2,000 even retail. It's like 1,950 or something. So it's cheaper, which is nice as well. Also, it is better performance in benchmarks compared to all these other flagships, as far as I understand it. That's why, like, you know, the tech influencers like Jace2Sense or whatnot, for their 3090 overclocking junk they did, they used EVGA FTW3s. So they're very well high performing, and they're less expensive for their performance, but they have the stigma around them. Now, EVGA also makes a different card, a board model, another SKU called the Kingpin, which is particular. It's marketed specifically for liquid nitrogen overclocking. They actually sell a plot for it. Now, I'm not really that into liquid nitrogen overclocking. I mean, it's way too much work for me. Gee whiz. I just want to enjoy games, or just to kind of enjoy the functionality of the graphics card. I just don't want to make it to clock just as much as I can get, just for the sake of clocking it as high as I can get it. But the Kingpin has a stigma of it to be a much more reliable graphics card than the FTW3. And despite being this crazy liquid nitrogen focused overclocking model thing, it's still less expensive if you can get a hold of one, which is only possible through the EVGA waitlist, which right now is closed, than other AIB partners' cards like the ROG Strix, or, you know, the Supreme X, or the Gaming X Trio, or something like that. It's also apparently a binned, but that binning doesn't necessarily, it's not very famous for being really good, but anyway. Anyway, I had an opportunity to buy one of these Kingpin cards because I was in the waitlist for the Kingpin card and my name finally came up. The problem with the Kingpin is that there's no air-cooled version of it. So you might go, well, yeah, because it's meant for extreme overclocking, and it has like a I don't know what the stock TDP is without like a BIOS update. It might be like 550 watts. It chunks out a lot of chunks out. What's that mean? It spits out. It uses a lot of power, and it doesn't seem practical to really air cool it. The problem is, I was like, yeah, but what if we don't want the Kingpin because we want to do extreme overclocking? We just want something with better components in it than the FTW3 so that it's more reliable, which this Kingpin would theoretically provide. So we don't, and you know, it's just as a cheaper alternative to other AIB partners cards. So, like, it would be nice if there was an air-cooled Kingpin anyway. But there isn't because EVGA didn't really account for that market because they thought that if you weren't into extreme overclocking, that you would just buy FTW3s and you wouldn't buy Kingpins. So anyway, my name came up for the Kingpin, and in order to cool the Kingpin, because there's no air shroud, you need to use a 360mm AIO, which is kind of infamous for loud pump noise. And or use a water block. Now, EVGA makes a water block for their very own Kingpin, but there's a waitlist for it. It's this low volume product for some reason, even though there's no silicon in it, it's just a block. Optimus makes a block for the Kingpin, but they just came out with it, and there's it's supposed to ship 5 to 6 weeks after you buy it. They'll charge your card right away, even before it ships, because it's Optimus, that's how they do things. And people have said they've waited over 8 weeks, so Optimus still hasn't shipped to them their blocks. Now, Optimus has shipped some blocks out. They haven't necessarily, they're not like not making it or anything. It's just that they haven't shipped out as soon as they've promised, and people are kind of upset with Optimus about that. It's a very high-performing block, but it's very expensive. It's $700 for this block. And it's you'll get it late, potentially 2 months after you put in your order, so I'm sitting here getting this email that says I have this opportunity to buy this Kingpin, which I theoretically would replace my FTW3 with, which would be more reliable, and I have to decide and figure out what to do with this, try to water block this thing, because that's how I would cool it, because I have like a loop in my computer, so I would use a water block. I don't have enough space left to put in an extra 360mm radiator. And I have to look at another waitlist for the water block, or 2 months for another water block, where it's really expensive. And I have to take out my old card, take the water block off, put the old air shroud back on, which requires me to go buy new thermal pads and thermal putty for it from EVGA, which they sell because I couldn't take off the old air shroud without destroying the thermal pads. Put this new water block on my Kingpin and put the Kingpin in there, so I'll drain the loop, refill it, and all that nonsense. It would be a lot of work and be kind of annoying. I gotta take my dinner out of the oven. Okay, I forgot where I left off. Something to do with like water blocks. I do all that work, get the new card in, and then I'd have to. Then now I have this FTW3, old FTW3, and what you would do with that is you would sell it because, although it kind of retroactively makes you a jerk in that you bought it in the first place, it's better to sell it than to sit on it because selling it puts it back into the market and helps drive the price down. So it's better to sell a card you have than to sit on it because selling it's bad or something. So I have to use eBay or something like that, and I wouldn't. It could get scanned by an eBay buyer who claims that the product didn't arrive or something, and asks for a refund even though it did, and try to steal your stuff, and it's kind of a mess. So I looked at this and thought, well, okay, I might get a more reliable graphics card out of this, but I have to do like a bunch of work that I did earlier I really hate doing to get it into my computer, and I'd have to sell off the old one. I probably would break even because these even despite eBay's fees, these 3090s still sell for a lot more than what you paid for them. So even with the water block, I probably would lose a lot of money on this deal in theory. But anyway, I kind of decided to pass it up and didn't actually take the Kingpin card, particularly because Lovelace was going to come out in later this year, and I was like, whatever. And hopefully my 3090 doesn't explode. It doesn't actually explode, but it's an expression. Although, yeah, that would be sad. So this is kind of the weird thing. So, I haven't really bought much Lego in a long time, and as most of you are watching this, because my subscriber base right now is it's only 18 people, and they're all Bionicle fans, and they all subscribed because I made these like Bionicle game videos. And so, and these people probably would not have gotten this far in this game, so far in this video, but whatever, if they did. I haven't bought much Lego in a while. The last Lego set I bought was the Mercedes Aurochs, which was a Technic set with around 2,700 parts. It was the Technic set with the most greatest piece count at the time. It's since been usurped by several of those Control Plus sets, which I'll never buy because they're so not self. How do I describe this? They're so not self-sufficient that it's annoying. It requires an app to run them. But aside from those, a version of a mobile crane, big red mobile crane, you can actually see it in the background of Hardware Unboxed videos right now. Say computer hardware reviewing channel, Hardware Unboxed. They actually have one of these in the background of their videos. But it was the highest piece count at the time, and it was okay, but it wasn't necessarily as fun as Lego used to be for me. I didn't even bother taking it apart and building the B model for it. It kind of sits on my shelf. Anyway, and it was kind of one of those I wasn't really drooling over it, but it was I need some Lego to build. I want some Lego, so I decided that was just kind of the thing that was the best choice of whatever they had. So, it's not something I really drooled over beforehand. And it was kind of okay, but again, it wasn't as exciting as how it was when I was a kid, right? And then after that was whenever that was probably not actually that long ago, about 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And then I sort of went into this kind of dark ages of sets. Of course, I started doing this YouTube stuff, but as far as buying Lego sets, I went to kind of a dark ages. And then I decided to kind of look on a whim one day. I decided to kind of look at whether or not the UCS Millennium Falcon from a couple of years ago was still in production. It was it's the second UCS Millennium Falcon. Anyway, apparently I didn't actually know this until I looked this up. It's actually Lego had been delaying the discontinuation of the sets a few times, and that kind of it made me go, yeah, Lego's trying to understand this stuff, because oftentimes Lego sets, right after they're discontinued, the price of them goes on the secondhand market goes way up. And this is evidence, at least to me, that Lego does not produce enough of each of their sets, so their production runs are too short, because it shouldn't be that the price immediately goes up after discontinuation. That means there's still a market for it after it's been discontinued. It's enough to drive the price up. This happens to me anecdotally. So most famously for me was the Motorized Bulldozer. It was a set I think that came out in 2007. It was a Technic set in 2007. Actually, in 2009, I saw it in 2007, but I kind of overlooked it. I was like, in 2009, I looked back at it later, just because I was kind of looking around Brickset, and I noticed it, and I looked at the building instructions. Like, wait, this is way more than I thought it was. I actually really want this. And I didn't buy it at the time because I didn't know about how to buy used, and it was discontinued. And so I found a set that I wanted shortly after it was discontinued, essentially. And it kind of felt really bad at the time. It was like, aw. So it's often that you tend to find Lego sets that you want right after, not even like far discontinued, just right after discontinued. It happens to me quite a bit. It actually happened to me with Crane Truck, which I think, I don't know, came out 2010 or something. So anyway, so with like the re-release of the Taj Mahal and the delayed ending of production of the UCS Millennium Ultimate Collector's Edition Millennium Falcon, it seems like LEGO is trying to understand that their production runs are maybe a little bit short, and they should make them longer if they want everybody who wants that set to get it before it gets discontinued. People are getting cut off somehow. And I was like, oh, well, at the time, this set looked really ridiculous to me because when it was first came out, because I had no money at the time, essentially. However, I did kind of like drool over the building instructions a bit. And I sort of had this admiration for these really large system sets, and like I always kind of wanted to try building one of them. Like either these very large Star Wars sets or these creator expert sets that are very large. But I never really had the opportunity, nor do I ever even, and still don't, have space in my house to put these completed models. So I tend to always pass them up. But I like look at it, it's like, okay, this thing's still in production. So it's like, okay, well, it's out of stock right now, but I'll just put on like an auto notify and, so close. And see if I buy it when it comes in stock. Well, it turns out that this thing goes out of stock on Lego Shop at Home immediately after, it was in less than an hour after it goes in stock. And so that made me go, I've discovered this after a couple of rounds, and it was like, oh great, so it's a scalping target. So it's being bought up by resellers. Well, not quite. It goes on Amazon for about $100 more than it does on Lego Shop at Home. So on Lego Shop at Home, it went for $700, and then on Amazon, it's like $800 or something. And it doesn't sell out immediately on Amazon. So it's not necessarily it's a scalping target, but it is in high demand by the consumer base, and particularly on Shop at Home, because a whole $100 less on Shop at Home than from a retailer, like maybe like Toys R Us doesn't really exist anymore, but something like that, right, or Amazon. Anyway, so the day after it went on, one of the days it went after on Shop at Home, it went in stock on Amazon. And unlike in Shop at Home, where it got sold out in like 40 minutes, on Amazon it lasted a while longer. I don't actually know. Last time I checked, it was actually still up. But it was not. It came in stock a day after. It was previously out of stock and came in stock, at least according to nowinstock.com, immediately after it came in stock on Lego Shop at Home. So the day before I get this Kingpin invite, I got an email that says that this Lego set is in stock on Lego Shop at Home. And this is weird. So, but 30 minutes later, it was out of stock. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to decide whether I'm going to buy it anyway because it's out of stock. The decision is made for me. But immediately after, I decided to neglect buying this Kingpin because I was like, this is just too much of a hassle. I checked nowinstock.com on the Star Wars UCS Millennium Falcon, and it said it was in stock on Amazon. And I checked Amazon, it was in stock, and I was like, oh, whatever. And so this weird sense in which I was like rewarding myself for not buying that Kingpin. I spent money elsewhere. It's like I had to spend money somewhere for some reason. And this thing is going to cause me a nightmare because I have no way to where to put it, and I'm going to have to glue together some sort of acrylic dust cover for it, and it was kind of stupid, but whatever. This is going to be how I'm going to get myself out of my LEGO Dark Age a bit and actually sort of indulge in some of these very, very large system sets for the first time. Not like because I've always kind of admired these Star Wars sets, not particularly because I've been a big Star Wars fan. I've seen most of the movies in that all but Solo, which I had the opportunity to see very easily. I could have watched it with my dad, but I decided to not because I didn't bother. I didn't think like it was a good enough movie that was going to be worth watching. So, but anyway, yeah, the very fact that I neglected to watch one of the movies might sort of indicate that I'm not really that big of a Star Wars fan. However, the LEGO models for these very large and structurally complex like sets that LEGO comes out for Star Wars ships and stuff ever since that I forgot the name of that ship. There's a set in 2001 that kind of started it all, and it kind of got famous with the Death Star 2 and the Imperial Star Destroyer in 2005. The Super Star Destroyer came out, I don't know, somewhere around 2010-ish. Anyway, so it's like the sets as like a LEGO fan, and not necessarily as a Star Wars fan. And it has generally sort of similar appeal to those large kind of creator expert sets like the Taj Mahal, the Sydney Opera House. Same sort of appeal, except they're actually a little bit more interesting because of the structure, the sci-fi structures that were required, as opposed to these kind of like real life buildings. They had to be a little bit more creative in the way that they designed these sets. So, whatever. Used to be, the Millennium Falcon used to be the highest piece count set they came up with. It was on release, and then, at least the first one was, and then it got usurped by the Taj Mahal. And then the second one beat the Taj Mahal, but, then that got usurped by the Colosseum. And then the world map doesn't count. I mean, it's a really easy way to create a high piece count set. It's kind of cheating. And then that got beaten by, just like a year later, by the Titanic, which is the first over 10K piece set they came out with. And I could have done like a Colosseum or like, the Taj Mahal is something that I kind of looked at a couple times. It was released twice. I looked at it a couple times, but I never actually ended up buying it. It seemed like a kind of a fun thing to do, like a goofy video about, where you build it as fast as you humanly possible and get bleeding fingers. Because it's so good, it facilitates that so well because there's no stickers. And it's very like a pain in the butt to build because it has all these so many 1x1 pieces. These 1x1 square plates that you have to align and when you stack them and so on. It's very fiddly. The thing that kind of made it so that I ended up ultimately not buying the Taj Mahal, even though it has a very, very good price to piece ratio, and a very fun build, it has a lot of fun structure to it, and lots of 1x1 plates, was because because of what it's a model of, right? It's a model of a great, very beautifully built white marble mosque in India. And that's great and all, except I'm not really that into white marble mosques in India. It's just like, and again, I said before that I wasn't that much of a fan of Star Wars, merely a fan of LEGO. But it's, for some reason, like, Star Wars is a little bit, like, people will kind of recognize the Millennium Falcon a little bit more fondness than they would necessarily the Taj Mahal. It's kind of what it's like a model of. It's just kind of like, It is convenient, though, that it broke down to pieces and that, too, though. With some of these other big models, they don't. Taj Mahal, you can kind of break it up. It's modular. So it's a little bit easier to store and move. Anyway. It's a fun set, though. Like, it was a fun set. I just didn't get it. The Roman Colosseum is a little bit like for me, that's a piece of history I sort of care about more than the Taj Mahal. Rome has a little bit more interest, but it is sort of a generic, not very. The structure of it isn't particularly of interest. It was very much a vertical stack of bricks with the studs facing up. So not necessarily the funnest build in the world or the funnest structure. And it's the structure of a ruin. It's a model of a ruin as well, which makes it sort of like makes it kind of ugly looking. So there's that. Yeah. I don't complain as much about other people do with repetitive builds, but like I could handle it, but it's just not the most fun set. It would last longer than the Millennium Falcon just because it has more pieces, but it's kind of it's not a very fun model, right? But some Christians were killed there, and then it was actually used by the church for offices and stuff later, and so on. It has some history that I kind of care about involved with it, but it is a model of a ruin, and it's not a very particularly interesting build to have interesting structural techniques involved. And then there's the Titanic, which is something that I have almost no interest in as what it's a model of, and it also, similarly to the, it also is a vertical stack. Not entirely, because it does have to turn to do the plating on the outside, but it is a very vertical stack-like structure, so it isn't that interesting of a structure either. So it turns out that of all those really large sets, the Millennium Falcon is probably the best one, comparatively, compared to those other options that I could have gone for. But if you really wanted the most piece count, biggest piece count, like the longest build, like the most connections of all of them, you would go for the Titanic. It's very, very, very well done set. Design-wise, it's just it's very vertical stacky, and B, it's not something I don't really care about the Titanic that much, and C, it's very hard to display because it's so long. So anyway, a little bit of my story about trying to get back into Lego a little bit here. So there's that. I was gonna mention. Okay, so there was something more to put in here. I don't remember exactly what it is. I'll do a couple more. I'll go to the hour mark, and if it doesn't come to me, it doesn't come to me. I'm gonna try to chip at this room a little bit. I don't remember how to do this room because I don't remember how to do any of these rooms. It looks not so bad. It's just a simple double grid weave. Who doesn't like a good double grid weave? Ah. Be really careful with this. Ah, always overshoot. Shot twice, gee. Okay, here, and then there, and then there, and then there, and there, and there, and there, and there. Ah. Well, at least I'm starting to get the rhythm down. I'm starting to get the hang of this room, which is good. I just gotta get more consistent with it. Or just get lucky. Ah. And ideally, I should go get the other ones, because I have to go through here anyway to get to those, but I mean by that is these ones. Well, I'm just going to try to go back anyway, see if I can get back. The ultimate goal is to get those ones in the top middle. Let me just change it up. I'm going to try going this way. I haven't figured out how to do this kind of motion yet. So you have to get to the other side somehow. Oh dear. Well, this is really tiring. If you're not really familiar with this landscape, basically you start here, you go all the way down to here. You get a key here, which allows you to get into this room. So you go all the way back through these rooms up to this room, which you get a key here that allows you to get into this room. So you go back through here into this room. We get a key that lets you go into this room. So you go back through here, back to here, and then into this room. And this is where the exit and the black paint tool are. Yeah. The farthest I've gotten is this room in a past playthrough. Anyway, I'm going to hang it up there, and then once I have some other news to expound of some sort, then I'll make another one. Oh, one random bizarre tidbit that came up. They taught me in college that 1 kilobyte of data was 1024 bytes, or 2 to the 10 bytes. I found out because of this not real argument, this information that came up at my work that it's kind of bizarre. If you buy like a graphics card, for example, it's supposed to be 8 gigabytes in size, will actually have like 8,600 and something million bytes, right? In it. Memory, like RAM, will have that many bytes, so it'll be based off like 1024. However, hard drives, they sell those based, all the hard drive manufacturers, so like Western Digital, Seagate, and so on, based on 1 kilobyte is 1,000 bytes, 1 megabyte's a million bytes, a gigabyte's a billion bytes, and so on, as opposed to being 10 to the 2 to the 10, 2 to the 20, 2 to the 30. And but Windows is still based on a kilobyte is 1024. So Windows will say that your supposed like 17 terabyte drive isn't really 17 terabytes, or 18 terabytes, however big it is. They say it's like 16 point something terabytes. But if the hardware manufacturers, yeah, it's because it's 1,000 bytes. It's like a terabyte is like a trillion bytes. What are you talking about, right? So apparently the IEEE standard right now is actually that a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. But it wasn't always that way. So it's something around the turn of the millennium that was changed. And you notice the hard drive manufacturers went along with the change. But other things like graphics cards, they did not go along with the change. So there's all these debates on the internet about like, hard drive manufacturers were trying to or just kind of cheating you, because it's not as many, you don't have as much information to be stored on the hard drive as you think it can, because they're using 1,000 is a kilobyte instead of 1024. This actually can add up to like a whole terabyte, and when you get up to terabyte level drives. But then you'll go, well, that's the IEEE standard. Well, why is it that just so happens that hard drive manufacturers in particular are the only ones that happen to adhere to this IEEE standard? Linux does too, but it's like very sus. In my personal opinion, you shouldn't change things because it creates confusion. There's a lot of people out there who still believe, including me until very recently, that 1 kilobyte is 1,024 bytes. If you make what's in the books different than what people believe is to be the case, and you do it on a change, that's going to create a huge amount of confusion. And you could say they did make change to make confusion because they're trying to preserve the integrity of the prefix kilo, but they made more confusion because they changed something. So, some like a little bit of a lesson from Shigiliter about change. Change already starts off behind. because changes make things confusing. If you're going to change something, it has to be so much better than before you made the change that it makes up for the negative that it has in itself just being a change. Change is bad because change creates confusion and makes people have to adapt and rewrite things to accommodate the change. Change something, now we have to change to accommodate. You make people have to have work and you make confusion. So you have to make up for that in what good things that change does. Keep that in mind. Yes, we are resistant to change. Why? Because change is bad. Unless the good of that change accomplishes exceeds the badness it has just from being a change in itself. End of rant. And because most people believe that a kilobyte is 1024 bytes, that's what it should be. It should be changed back to where the mainstream belief is, not this obscure one. Anyway. Yes, mighty sus how my hard drive is based on 1000. My graphics card is based on 1024. This standard's so great, then why are the hard drive manufacturers in particular being the one to adhere to it? Maybe it's because they're the things whose price most scales with the amount of information in them. Well, that was the kind of cheese I just accomplished there. Okay, that should be it for this recording. I got through half a room. Yay. At least it's better than last time where I got through 0 rooms.